So I'm really pleased to introduce this next session called Insights, the Benefits of Hiring People Not Typically Considered. We have two wonderful presenters with us today. Dana Lariviere is president and CEO of the Chameleon Group, one of the original recovery-friendly workplaces in New Hampshire, where he serves on the Governor's Recovery-Friendly Workplace Commission, providing a wealth of experience from 3 decades of work in sales and operations throughout North America and international markets. Dana is joined by Steve Dean, who has over 15 years of leadership experience in distribution and logistics companies, leading operations in the food service, big box retail, pharmaceutical, and auto part industries while creating a reputation as a turnaround manager for operations in need of cultural transformation. It's my pleasure to introduce Dana and Steve. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I guess I'll start off this afternoon. First of all, thank you very much for everyone attending. Thank you to the MRC for inviting us to present on an extraordinarily important topic. We are a call center that is located in the seacoast portion of New Hampshire, the 8 or 9 or 10 mile stretch of New Hampshire that actually has seacoast. We've been in business for about 22 years now, and we would be considered a small business. We have about 45 full-time employees. Our story for the purposes of this begins in 2011. Back in 2011, we hired a young lady, which in the call center business, there's a fair amount of turnover, a fair amount of folks that come and go within the business. So hiring is kind of an everyday occurrence for us. That's not the part that's really remarkable. She worked for us for several months, was probably not the most reliable person that we've ever employed. I had some difficulty getting in on time on Monday mornings, frequently wanted to get out early on Fridays, and the other days of the week could be a challenge at times as well. Eventually, we fast forwarded, probably she was with us for about 6 months or so. We eventually parted company and terminated her employment because she was just not reliable, just couldn't show up to work. And one of the things that we often say here is, in order to perform, you have to be here. You have to show up to work. So that was that. 5 years later, in 2016, I receive a phone call from this young lady that I happened to answer the phone for. And she asked if she could be reconsidered for employment. Now, that was interesting, because I don't normally, wouldn't normally be picking up the phone. So it was kind of a kismet that I actually answered the phone. And the second part was that I had communicated to her that we really didn't consider for rehire people that we had let go for not being responsible and showing up to work on time. It was then that she said to me, well, I really need to communicate to you that the reason why I was unreliable was while I was working for you, I was addicted to heroin. Now, you probably could have knocked me over with a feather at that point, because I pride myself on knowing a little bit about who our employees are and what's going on in their world and, kind of what's going on. I think the British have a term for it. It's called, I was gobsmacked. And I did what most HR folks would tell you never, ever, ever to do. But while I was on the phone with her, I actually Googled her name. And as she was talking, she was telling me that she had gotten into a recovery program. She had been clean and sober for 2 years. She'd become a certified recovery coach. She sponsored people. And sure enough, as I'm pulling these things up on the internet, I see that that's really true. We had a great conversation, and I decided to kind of break my own rules and give her an opportunity. One of the great reasons why I decided to do that was she had said to me during the course of our conversation that she felt that she needed to make amends to us because she felt that she had not adequately represented herself and done what we had paid her to do during the time that she was there. And I would learn later what amends meant, but I thought that was kind of a great concept, and we would be willing to give her another chance to come in. So I kind of thought that was the end of it. I'd made the determination to do that. I went to communicate with my management team about my decision to do that and explain the situation that this young lady had called and that she had suffered from this horrible disease and that we were going to give her an opportunity. And that was when stigma slapped me right in the face. We had my management team. I'm a good salesman. I had a real sales job to do at that point. I was actually taken back by the amount of pushback that I got back from my management team, some of whom I'd worked with for many years, about all of the standard things that you can imagine. You're not really going to bring this person in here. We're not going to have an addict in here. We're not going to do this and we're not going to do that and all those kinds of things. And I got a little upset. I got a little upset about the fact that I wanted to give this person a second chance, and we were getting all of this pushback. And we ended up, sometimes, as I've said in my organization, it's good to be king. We made the decision. We brought her back in, and I explained to her at the time, you have used up 10 of your 9 lives. We really need to have this be work well. And the long and the short of it is she crushed it. And when I say she crushed it, she did a phenomenal job. She was better than I had ever expected, better than I ever hoped. We invited her to be part of our management team. And now remember, back in 2016, in the state of New Hampshire's been the focus of the opioid crisis for a good chunk of what has been the opioid crisis. I think this the last statistic I read for back in the time, between 2011 and 2016, there was a 1,600% increase in fentanyl deaths in the state of New Hampshire. At the same time, we were having one of the lowest unemployment rates in the country here. So hiring was very difficult at the time. We were having lunch one day, and I was having lunch with this young lady and some of the other members of the management team. And I said, hey, can you give me, are there other people out here, out in the, that you know of that might be in a kind of similar situation to you, which, we could talk to about maybe what they would want to come work for us? And she said, are you kidding me? I then began to really find out what I didn't know. We shared a parking lot with a recovery organization, and we'd been in that location for almost 10 years, and I had no clue that this recovery organization was there, what they did, what they were about, any of that stuff. So we decided that we were going to embark on a journey to figure out how we could work with these folks and be able to sort of kill 2 birds with 1 stone, be able to help people that were in the recovery community, but again, not entirely altruistically. We needed employees, and this was a underutilized area of potential employees. Now, at about the same time, Governor Sununu in the state of New Hampshire embarked upon the very beginning phases of what would become the Recovery Friendly Workplace Initiative in the state of New Hampshire. So as we were going along, we rapidly discovered that there weren't a lot of other companies like us that were looking to do this. There weren't a lot of policies or procedures or processes in place, but there were a great deal of recovery organizations who were willing to work with us and were willing to help us out. We got help from some of the most, you would think of, unusual places. We met with the commissioner of the Department of Corrections here in the state of New Hampshire and got connected with probation and parole, got connected with drug court. Stratford County Drug Court is one of the models for the country here in New Hampshire. We began to sort of work with, well, what kind of rules can we work with? What kind of things, what kind of policies can we put into place? And when I tell you that this was it wasn't a smooth road. It was an iterative process. We did a lot of the try it, fix it, try it. But as we got involved with the recovery community, we found that there were other organizations that were asking the same questions that we are. So now I'm proud to say we were asked to participate in Governor Sununu's Recovery Friendly Workplace, and I am a member of the commission. And I wanted to share a little bit of information that I think may be useful for employers. We currently have 333 workplaces in the state of New Hampshire, representing about 86,000 employees that participate in the Recovery Friendly Workplace Initiative. And we did a survey, the commission did a survey early this year about what the impact was of those people that were involved in the recovery-friendly workplaces. And some interesting statistics, and I apologize because I'm going to read some of them to you. Now, these are people who have communicated as a result of being involved in a recovery-friendly workplace the following things. 44% said that there was an increase in workplace morale. 58% said that there was a higher willingness to hire people who were in recovery, and the quality of customer relations and public relation increased in 41% of the businesses. So from my perspective as a business owner, the thing that we were most concerned about was we're risk intolerant, right? A lot of businesses are risk intolerant. So they want to know, how do I mitigate the risk? They want to know what other organizations, what other businesses have done things like this, and how do they do it? How do they develop their policies? How do they develop their programs? They want to know things like, well, how do I incorporate this into my employee handbook? How do I incorporate disciplinary actions and those kinds of things as well? So I think that what I'm trying to communicate to employers and anybody that will listen long enough is we're all dealing with this issue one way or another, right? So some of us are dealing with it with our eyes open and with open arms and participating, and others of us are dealing with it by putting our head in the sand. I think that there is no, I have a good friend of mine that owns some businesses, and we were having this conversation, and we've been fortunate enough to have a platform where we can speak with folks. And he said, this is all great, Dana, that you're doing. This is all fantastic. This is terrific stuff. He said, but I don't know if I could have people my people have to handle cash. And I said to him, you know what the difference is between your business and my business is? And he said, no. And I said, we both have people who suffer from substance use disorder. I just know who they are. We provide a level of service. And I think one of the earlier speakers really nailed it and hit it on the head. Our organization, we're striving that we don't want to be a recovery-friendly workplace. We want to be an employee-friendly workplace. And we believe that we should give the same level of care, compassion, and attention to each employee for whatever their journey is. So I often say, if you substitute the word cancer for the word substance use disorder or addiction, what would your reaction as an employer be? It certainly wouldn't be, oh, you have cancer? I have to whack you. It certainly wouldn't be, you become ineligible for employment. It certainly wouldn't be, you're less trustworthy. What would it be? It would be, oh my God, that's horrible. How can I help? And that's really where we need to be. I'm going to go back for a moment to the, and I promised our hosts that I would keep to my allocated time. But I want to go back for a moment to the altruistic thing. We are a for-profit business, right? So we make money off of the labor of other people. That's what we do. But this is one of those rare examples, I think, in life and in the world where what the right thing to do is also the right thing to do for your business. It's a good thing to do. And we get the opportunity to give back. We are, it's funny because we now refer to ourselves as the home of second chances. And we don't really, as an organization, care where you've been as much as we care where you're going. We work with folks, and just as if you were going to have, let's say that you had an employee that came to you and said, Dana, I've got 2 appointments next week for chemotherapy, and I've got this appointment for that and this appointment for the other thing. We would make accommodations for those individuals to be able to do those things. Same thing with our folks that are in this particular community. If somebody has a treatment regime, or if they have a parole or a probation obligation, we work with them. What we found is that the people that are in this community within our organization are loyal. They've told us that for the first time in their adult life, they've not had to lie in an interview or on a resume. They will be open and honest and communicate to us when they're struggling, and we can actually get them the resources and the help that they need. And we find that they aren't as likely to move for $1 an hour because the benefit that they find in working in an open and transparent workplace far exceeds what they can find in other places. So part of what I want to communicate to everybody, or what I'd like to get across to everyone, is that yes, you very much can do this. You are dealing with this now in one form or another, and by opening up your heart and opening up your minds to this, you can create a much better workplace. We've found that by doing this simple act, and trust me, I was the guy originally that said, not my problem. You chose to do the drugs, you stuck the needle in your arm, and this is your deal, you deal with it. The epiphany that I've had is we treat all of our employees better. We have more compassion for all of our people. We're better at having those conversations that are rough sometimes, but actually compassionate, and coming back to them and saying, hey, notice you're a little bit off today. What's going on? What's happening? We find that people will come to us and have these conversations. We just had a conversation about a week ago. Great employee's been with us about 1.5 years, came into the office one day and said, I'm really thinking about using. Well, you know what? The fact that they came in and said, I'm thinking about doing this, we could get them the resources to help them, and they could move on with their life. We've had people who've been able to put their lives back together, people who've been able to have gainful employment with a career, get an apartment, get their families back. That's very rewarding in and of itself. Our goal from a sort of a fiscal perspective, I also look at it like, here's our opportunity to be able to create something where people are net contributors to society instead of a net drain on society. And all the self-esteem issues that go with that. People feel better. People walk with a spring in their step that they haven't had for years. I know that I've only got a couple of moments left. I'd like to be able to make myself available to answer questions. I'm perfectly willing, and if the hosts want to put my contact information up, I'm perfectly willing to speak with any of you personally about this, because I feel so strongly that this is the right thing for you to do as a business, and there are ways that we can all help each other. If you look at recoveryfriendlyworkplace.com, or it might be recoveryfriendlyworkplace.org, I'm sorry. But that's the New Hampshire workplace. There's all kinds of resources that are available and contacts, and we would love to speak with whoever whoever would like to talk to us and talk about our shared experience. And I will hand it back over. Thank you.
Thank you. We will hear from Steve, and then we will go ahead with some Q&A time. So thank you so much. Go ahead, Steve.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Steve Dane. I wanted to talk a little bit about the experience I've had hiring individuals with substance use disorders, and really hiring a more inclusive workforce overall. For those who've worked with me with MRC, excellent partner for almost everything. I'm going to open with a quote I've always loved. And it's an Oprah Winfrey quote. And if anybody doesn't like Oprah Winfrey, that's an issue for me. She's just a great lady. But it says, everyone wants to ride with you in the limo, but what you want is someone who will take the bus with you when the limo breaks down. It's so true, right? So when someone's limo breaks down and they feel like they're at the lowest point, that's when we need to help pick them up. Us as business leaders, we have a unique responsibility. And the reason I say it's unique is because we all work in different industries. And so many of you work in human services, many of you work in emergency services, things like that. But in distribution and warehousing, we do the same thing every day. It never really changes, right? We move boxes, we move freight, we move it faster and more accurate and safer than everyone else. That's always our claim to fame. But what's really neat is when we can make an impact in someone's life. And sometimes you don't realize the impact you're making until you've already made it. One of the companies I used to work for, J. Polyp Distribution, we had a program where we hired individuals with substance use disorders who were in recovering, right? And we had several folks that we had brought in, but through the time there, we noticed that this substance use disorders are everywhere, right? It's everywhere, and it's just when you're not looking at it, it creeps up on you. I mean, I've watched people overdose. I've watched people at their lowest, and when everybody has left them, that's when you're as a leader can stand with them and say, I still believe that you have something positive to contribute. And I think that's really what it is. So I've had several people, right? As I had one gentleman who had come to work because there was the only place he could get a job. He got the job, was actually picking for us. He was picking a full case product. So ultimately, you're just going to a pallet every day, picking cases off that pallet for about 8 to 10 hours. So 8 to 10 hours of doing that. He was doing it for about a year. Same thing every day, routine, coming to work every day, not very motivated. As I remember, I talked to him one day, and he told me about a conveyor system issue that he had, and he pointed it out. He said, well, no one listens to me anyways. I said, well, let's listen to you and let's see if we can fix it. So we fixed it, and then I had a conversation with him, and it turns out he had a lot more to offer. He didn't have the confidence. And I think that was lacking in a lot of folks is the confidence level, knowing that somebody can believe that you have something to contribute and then give you the opportunity to do that. So we were able to promote him, and he actually assisted me quite a bit, not only with metrics, but with programming as we continue to build our more inclusive workforce. It gave the confidence he had to not only excel and get promoted, but also be able to confidently speak about his past. He wasn't embarrassed. He wasn't concerned. He had that trust. He built that trust with me and with many of the other leaders to be able to speak confident and say, hey, I had something going on. I'm done with it now, and I'm moving forward, and look what I've done. Look what I can contribute and the example I can set for others. And so I'm going to go back a ways and use another example. We had another person who came through a recovery program and actually was hired through to the company, was still in the actual program itself, and he worked his way up. He worked a lot of hours. He felt a sense of belonging, something to focus on. Dana said sometimes you need to have something to focus on at work. This gentleman had something to focus on, and because he had that, he was able to build himself a family. He finally had some supports outside of work because he had something to focus on every day. He still went to his meetings. He had to go to all those things, but as he continued to move forward, he was able to move up, and eventually became a manager, and he led people. And what was interesting was this particular person was very hard on other people who were in recovery. He almost had zero tolerance, right? Did not want to give people a chance. So I had that conversation with him. And I said, listen, somebody opened a door for you. You need to open a door for somebody else. And that's really, I think, what we're talking about is that somebody has opened a door for you. If you look at this panel and you look at everybody out here in this Zoom meeting, at some point in your life, somebody has opened a door for you. Right. And if you look at this panel, I mean, most of us wouldn't be in the positions that we're in if it was 50 years ago. I know I wouldn't. Right. And so somebody opened a door. Right. And so I'm not asking businesses to just open the door. I'm saying be a leader, a true leader, drive that inclusive workforce and put your foot through that door and kick it in. We've got to show a united front as we move forward that there is this untapped talent pool. Which I guess at this point in the game, how can you have an untapped talent pool? Everybody has something to give. We need to dive into that and tap it, really, right? We've got to shake it up. We've got to bring people in. We hire people with disabilities, right? I hire a lot of people with disabilities. It's again another untapped talent pool. So I sit there and say, we're in a labor shortage, right? We're about to embark on a generation of folks where we have less people working, and we need to handle that. At this point, we need to drive that talent. So I'm going to share something with you that I don't share very often. When I was younger, I was once told that I had style but no substance. I was a senior in high school. I was thinking about college. I didn't know what I wanted to do, but my teacher said, you have a lot of style, but no substance. You have nothing to contribute. That is a skill. And so I felt like I would be part of that untapped talent pool, going through speech pathology, going through some special education classes, all that through my childhood moving up. You wonder if you have something to give, and that lowers your confidence level. So now I feel like I have something to give, and it's about substance. So I'm telling you, it's about tapping into that talent pool. It's about creating an environment where people feel comfortable bringing their whole self to work, right? We're so used to, as a society, being able to judge someone, right? We've through the years, there's always been somebody that we look our nose down on, or somebody that we judge because, well, they're not doing what they should be doing. Who's to say what we should be doing, except treating each other with respect, giving each other a chance. And I think that's what everybody has done for so long. That's what we need to do now. So we look at this untapped talent pool, and you find out where people fit. People have something to give, and that's really what we need to do. So as you look at people, I think that's what we need to do. We can cater almost any hiring program to bring people in, right? We can do that as a team, and I think that's huge. And one of the best parts, I think, about hiring people is that ultimately you are the one that they remember. That business, that story, that first step in the right direction is the one they speak about for the rest of their lives. I remember that time when I was something down and out, and then somebody gave me a chance. And then when they get that chance to pay it forward, they do. And that's huge. And that's that untapped talent pool. Creating unique schedules so that people can attend meetings and treatments and things like that is huge. We need to do it because it's the right thing to do. We need to allow people that chance to talk. You have ERGs, you have employee resource groups. Give people a chance to share a bit. It's not embarrassing. If anything, it's a success story. The success story is when we move past our obstacle and we say, now I've turned that into a strength. It's what shapes me. It's what moves me. And I think that's huge. So if there's one thing that I can really talk about, and for those who've seen me speak before, I can talk for a long time. So, but if I can say this, I think that one of the biggest takeaways as you open up your talent pool, as you open up your workforce, is give people a chance, open up a door. And if you have people on that other side of that door that are holding it closed, knock pretty loudly and then put your foot through the door, right? Break through that door, allow that talent pool in, train that talent pool, and know that when you're training folks, you're going to have to get back down to the basics. You're going to have to teach people at some point some home training. We talk about it, right? I think when most of us were kids, our parents taught us some home training. We don't have that anymore, which I think is why we have a lot of people who are in recovery and in programs, because they need that. Managers and leaders are no longer managers. They are coaches. They are teachers. They are mentors. They are all those other things. And then at the last step of it, they're a manager. Then at the last step of it, they're a supervisor. But first, we are teachers. We are coaches. We are mentors. And if we can teach and coach and mentor and bring people forward and make them feel confident and that they have something to give and something to contribute, then you have an employee for life. But most importantly, you have a success story. They have a success story. Everyone's got one. We're just opening doors so everybody is able to have one. And I think that's really what it's about. And so tap into this talent pool. And I'm going to close with a quote that I love, which is simply, help people see themselves in the story, and it will become their story too. Let's give a chance for people to have a story, and you have that power. So I invite you to create unique ways to open the door for people, or put on a big boot and kick it in. I'll be there with you. Thank you so much.
Wow. I'm just blown away. I have to say, and clearly people in our audience are too. Dana, you were talking and probably didn't see all the little reactions. Steve, thank you so much. Really, really amazing. Hard to kind of follow that up with some questions, but we are asking, and you both alluded to this, but I don't know if you have anything else to add to it. We're trying to ask all of our presenters about, what are the strengths you've seen with people in recovery when it comes to employment? For those, how do you, I guess, to use your metaphor, Steve, how do you put the boot through the door in terms of helping other employers who may be here to consider someone in recovery?
Yeah,
And you may not know they're in recovery, but
we it's funny because our organization, we actually lead with that. When we interview people, we talk to people, we're loud and proud about that we're a recovery friendly and a mental health friendly workplace. It's kind of upfront for us. We actively recruit in the space. I would say, to echo Steve's comment, let people amaze you. Let people amaze you. Don't be open to letting you be surprised what you can learn. We walk through life as managers. I know a lot of times, and I'm going to say this, my generation, is we walk around thinking we know it all, right? We don't. And not only do we not, there are people that have an awful lot to contribute if you just shut up and listen to them. And I think, don't be afraid to let people amaze you.
right.
I would agree with Dana there. I think that if you when you're talking about kicking that door, and you're talking about how do you really sell this and break that door down, I think a lot of it is going back to caring for each other, right? Is showing that there's three heart hungers, right? Knowledge, feeling important, and feeling cared for. I think as a manager, if you do those things, you'll end up having people share with you their story, and you won't realize. I mean, I tell you, one of the success stories I had, I worked with the guy for 2 years before I found out, because this whole time he was building his confidence. So it's often like managing a person with a disability. That not every disability is something you can see, and so as you do that, you accept the person for the person. You ask the person, and you understand that that one person is simply that one person. It's not going to represent everybody.
Yep. And you've talked a lot about, both of you have talked a lot about strengths, certainly all of us have supervised or perhaps been employees who've struggled with many different things, not just substance use disorders. How do you help people who are struggling? In the case of somebody who is in recovery, or you may suspect isn't, and is struggling with by their behavior, you're wondering if they're struggling with drugs or alcohol. How do you help those folks?
Go ahead, Steve.
So for us, we really we suspected somebody had a problem, had a concern, right, that they were kind of relapsing back into it, and so we got closer. I got closer, and I think, and this is it can be a slippery slope depending on how many people you have, but sometimes you have to get closer and just remind them there are other options, there are other avenues, and you have to remind them of what they've accomplished so far, so that they don't slide back. A lot of what I saw was stress related. So I have a lot of stuff piled on me. I don't know how to manage it, so I'm going to slide backwards. And so it's giving people ways to manage stress. which isn't just people in recovery, but the generation we're dealing with. Stress management is a thing. I mean, and how do we manage it? I think a lot of it is the training, the tools, and it's not just training and tools you give somebody, but it's truly knowing the employee to look for those signs. Because if you don't really know your team, you're not going to be able to tell if something doesn't look right. Right. And so I think that's a big piece. So I think getting closer to that person, having the one-on-one conversations. I scheduled one-on-one so I could tell if somebody was out of step and what we needed to do. And then I involved HR. You know, I mean, and it wasn't HR like I'm going to get you in trouble. It was more HR to say, what supports do we have?
Mm.
Can we offer some time off, a leave, whatever we need to do to really help that person? And it seems to work.
I think I agree. I think being open, honest, and transparent during the whole experience of employment allows you to have those conversations in a much better and more timely way, right? So we've gotten progressively better at having what most organizations would think were very difficult conversations. They're not as difficult because you can, if you always walk up to somebody and say, hey, how's your day going? Then the 4th or 5th or 6th or 70th day, when they kind of give you the look, you go, hang on, let's go have a chat, because it's not unusual, right? It's not the exception, it's the rule. So I think to echo Steve's comments about getting closer to people, that's not something you do after something's happened. That's something you do. And it allows you to be more perceptive. And I think that if you're open, honest, and transparent, you can be open, honest, and transparent about all things, right? And I think when I say be open, you got to be willing to listen and not judge. I think my biggest fallacy was judging, right? And that was one of my things. I was building a business and I was trying to get this done. And you're hell bent for leather, as they say, but you got to be open. And that takes some work. That takes a little bit of self-realization, and that takes some work.
Thanks. You're really, both of you, talking about universal design when you help people with disabilities of any kind, often, or any kind of struggle. It helps many other people that, they may have started the sidewalk cutouts for wheelchairs, but if you have a stroller, it works. All those doors that open electronically, everything. And Dana, what you just said actually fits right into one of the great questions that we got. Specifically for you, this person wanted to know what helped change your mind from not my problem to becoming an advocate.
I think if I'm going to be 100% open and honest, as I just said, you should be. Part of it was intellectual laziness, right? So it's easy to blame somebody else. So that's convenient. That's the way to do it. I think what really kind of tipped me over was, remember the young lady I spoke about? Well, when she first came to work for us or with us, I didn't know that much about her. And then when she came back to work, I found out she had a young daughter. This is the things that she was struggling with housing and things like that. And the yardstick that I like to think I use in my business is this an environment that I would want my wife, my daughter, or my grandchildren in, right? How would I want them to be treated if they're in the workplace? And if we're not treating people that way, then we need to fix that. And I kind of turned that flashlight back onto myself, right? And said, what is your approach to this? How do you live this? Because I think you have to live it. It's not enough to placate it. You have to live it. The young lady I referred to came into my office and said, you know that you saved my life. A year and a half ago, she was living in the woods. She came out. We gave her an opportunity. She earned the opportunity. We didn't give her anything. She earned the opportunity. She'd been a great employee. And my response to her was, you'll never know how much you've given to me, right? And the opportunity that I've had to be able to know all of these folks. So I think that I think it's a great feeling, because you can, when you get to a place where you say, listen, open up your mind, open up your heart. it's a great place to be. It's a great place to live.
Thank you. And we have another question about how can we manage confidence that has been lost due to stigma, especially when it seems to erode the success for what people have worked for. So how do you, and Steve, you mentioned some of those soft skills and the confidence, the home teaching, and even your own experience. How do you help people get their confidence back?
I think one of the main things, and it's always fun and in buildings for me, because usually I go into a building that needs some cultural transformation. So you end up having a lot of what we call stretch assignments, a lot of things that you can give people that's a unique task that they're working on, or a small project team of something that they're working on. And it could be something that you could handle yourself, but you're going to pass off to them to give them a chance to be creative, to bring something to the table, to speak up and speak out. And I think that's how I have people build confidence. I mean, they always say that you have to build trust, right? So you build trust, and a lot of people say, you do it through conversations and things like that. I believe that I build trust organically by taking action. And they always say, everybody can talk, but can you walk the walk, right? And so I think that a lot of folks lack the trusting piece. And so just the fact that you're going to extend trust to that person to do something, and you're going to trust their opinion, and you're going to trust what they bring to the table, I think that drives people and drives some of the confidence for them to kind of question, why do you all of a sudden trust me? Right. And I used to tell people, I trust you until I don't. Right. And so you show me that I can trust you. You have my trust forever. The minute you don't have that, it's because we've had some sort of issue. And usually it's, tell me, even if it's bad, tell me, because I'm a big kid. I can handle it. Right. So I think that's one of the big pieces, giving people stretch assignments. It gives them a chance to go home and talk about something that's different than their regular everyday items, and it gives them something to look forward to. And when they accomplish it, celebrate the win. No matter how big or small it is, celebrate the win, because that person, and I tell you, there's a lot to be said for a picture and a certificate. Sometimes there's a lot to be said for changing a process and having that person present that process to the team. That confidence building is huge. It gives them something to own. And if you can, they've already owned the fact that they're trying to better themselves. Let them own some of the projects that they're doing to help better the business and the organization. I think that's really huge.
Yeah.
I was going to say there's two things that I wanted to say about that. Again, I find myself in violent agreement with Steve. I think my dad taught me something years and years ago, and he said, you trust people till they give you a reason to do otherwise. Right. And so I look at it as one of the best ways to get them to trust themselves is I bestow the gift of trust on them when I meet them. Right. Here's the gift. It's not up to me what happens with that gift. It's up to you. So I'm going to give you this gift. And if you want to nurture it and grow it and do all those other kind of things, here it is. It's a gift. If you want to step on it, you can step on it, but it's your gift to do with what you choose. So I think you give that gift of trust. I also think you build a culture within your organization that says we don't default is not mistrust, right? Default is trust. So I work with the managers, and sometimes we have conversations behind closed doors where managers go, I know that they're lying to me about this, or I know, well, I'll challenge them. How do you know that? Right? Because would you like me to judge your performance with the same yardstick that you're judging this individual's performance with, or do you want to have a conversation? So it's again about building that culture internally that says, give them the opportunity to win. We're trying to catch them being successful. You're not trying to catch them being unsuccessful. It's easy to do that, right? So you got to catch somebody doing something right. That's what your goal should be as a manager.
Gonna just turn in a slightly different but parallel direction here. And I'm gonna preface this question for those in the audience who may not know this, that so many folks with substance use disorders, not all by any stretch of the imagination, but many people also suffer potentially from mental health disorders, often have a history of trauma of some kind or other kinds of co-occurring mental health disorders. So this person wanted to know, and there are plenty of people who have mental health disorders who may be attempting to self-medicate through using drugs and alcohol, but there are folks who don't have any substance use disorders, just some kind of mental illness. And this person wanted to know, have you encountered employees with mental health disorders such as bipolar, major depression, and how do you manage situations when they're not functional? Because in those kinds of disorders too, they can be, relapsing, remitting also. So
yeah, great. That's a great question. With it, we are actually dual designated in the state of New Hampshire. So we're a mental health friendly workplace, and because the two are inextricably entwined, right?
Mhm.
Recovery friendly workplace. So we recognize that the skills and things that we learn to deal with one are absolutely transferable to dealing with the other situation. And we years ago, we decided that we were going to get all of our managers CPR trained within the organization, just in the event that something would happen. Well, now we have them ACEs trained and mental health trained so they can recognize some of these things. And what we do is the same approach that we would have for anything else, which is, do they need a medical leave of absence? Do they need, we actually have connections and networked with the various mental health agencies within the Seacoast area and within so that we can refer people, not just refer, we're not handing them off. We're kind of walking with them to the place to say, here's the issue. I think it's always a very it's a very tender place to be, because you want to respect people's privacy and you want to be able to do that. But when it becomes obvious, and yes, we have dealt with that on more than one occasion, I will tell you, our involvement in becoming a recovery-friendly workplace and a mental health friendly workplace has had a huge impact on our ability to deal with it. Because historically, 10 years ago, we probably would have just let the person go. To be very honest, we probably would have walked away from this person. We believe that everybody's worth investing in. When you brought them into your organization, you believe that they had a value, that they were going to bring something to your organization, or else you wouldn't have hired them. So you've got to trust that intuition, and you need to work with these folks to make sure that we get them the services and the help they need. You're not always successful. We don't always win. And again, I don't know about Steve. There are times that you don't win them all. You don't. And relapse is part of recovery. And we've put sort of policies in place that say, if you relapse and you tell us what's going on, you're eligible for rehire once you've gotten your treatment. If you don't tell us, it's all about honesty and trust and transparency. And that's a two-way street. This is not, and I want to make sure I make this point, this is not just the employer just giving. It has to be a two-way street. We expect performance. We expect people to do their job. We expect people to be accountable, and we will work with them. I'll take a breath now.
Steve, anything?
Yeah, I think to kind of dovetail off of what Dana said, it's not charity, right? Because nobody really wins there, right? You don't have a long-term sustainability with that. It's all about building that confidence, getting the performance, and same expectations as everyone else over time. For us on the mental health side, we had a very large hiring initiative, hiring people with disabilities, and we had several that had mental health disorders. I think it's the right term. I'm sorry for human services. I'm a distribution guy, so bear with me here, right? But I would say that we often reached out to partners if we needed to, and because one thing that I think a lot of employers get concerned about is, I'm not equipped to handle every situation that comes up. What do I do? And then if I handle it wrong, should I just not handle anything, right? And so I always encourage people, like I think MRC has been very good at actually being an involved partner. And I say that because I've worked with a lot of different partners. And when I say involved, I mean, they've picked up the phone for me after hours. They've, you know, I'm just going to say it, for a state employee to pick up the phone at 9 o'clock at night on a Sunday night to say, Steve, what can I do to help is huge, right? And so I think that's one of the huge things for me, is that the fact that you have a partner that's willing to help and often understands that you're not going to be the expert. And you need the assistance, you need the help so that you can create a more inclusive work environment. I think that's what it is, right? And so we've reached out to the partners a lot to guide us through, because oftentimes, you know, we can lend an ear for somebody to talk to, and we may see some things out of sorts. I've one thing that I've always enjoyed is that no matter who I've sourced through MRC, I have a relationship with MRC for the time that person is employed with me. So, I mean, I've had Molly, Tara, Owen, Bill, you know, Joan. I mean, you have that lifetime kind of span of a partnership, which not only helps us as employers, but helps the person, right? And really, also that's what we're all trying to do is you know, open that door and help people. And so we've had some, and it's worked out very well. And I think we may be experts in our own fields, but at some point we'll have to stand back and say, I don't know, I want to learn. Teach me, right? And I think that's something that's a tough thing to do too. But sometimes you have to say, I don't know, I want to learn. Teach me. And then as we move forward, I'm going to help create a better environment for everybody, not just that one person.
Yeah, thank you. That's great. You know, I feel as though this conversation is leading very nicely right into one of the questions. I'm going to paraphrase this a little bit. That HR management tends to be concerned about lawsuits. There's a fear of navigating around some of that with someone with a substance use disorder. Are they saying the wrong thing? And, you know, this questioner wants to know, with such an open, honest, and transparent approach, have either of you, you know, had any legal issues? Has it, you know, do you feel like you have fewer legal issues for the company? And do you have any kind of external training to come in and support management around any of this?
We don't have any particular training. I will tell you that, and this could be a topic all by itself. You can get sued for anything as an employer. I think as a business owner, I presented at the Society of Human Resource Management conference in Vermont about a month or so ago. And I said, you want to strike terror in a business owner's heart, put them in a room full of HR people. But what we found is we don't run our business in fear. We don't operate our business from a position of fear. We want to mitigate risk wherever we can. And we believe that you mitigate risk by understanding and having open conversations about the process. And if you educate managers that we don't do this and we do this, and you have these conversations, could somebody say something wrong? Yeah, you can always say something wrong. That's an exposure you always have. I personally believe that we've mitigated our risk to the greatest extent possible by being able to have these conversations, have people with policies and procedures in place that people know about. It's all right up there and up in front of everybody. And if the reason you get into these legal issues is because somebody feels hard done by, right? If you don't put yourself in a position where you're putting somebody into a corner unnecessarily, you're gonna eliminate a lot of those risks. So I think from our point of view, you can't run your business from fear, from a perspective of fear. And we want to make sure that we teach our employees and our managers, here's the right way to approach it.
Great. Steve, do you want to add anything? Or
I'll just say that if you treat people respectfully, then you really shouldn't have many issues.
Right.
And we partner with HR a lot, and there's often times when I have to go and say, I'm about to say this. Does this make sense? And sometimes they'll say, don't say that, and say this instead. Oh, okay, no problem. I'm a big fan of having HR in HR work with you. So oftentimes I've had conversations where I've had HR in the room with me. That way it puts the person at ease a little bit more, and you know, they have that extra ear there which I think.
Yep. This next question, the person who wrote it said it seems like a basic question, but I think it's actually pretty nuanced. And I'll throw it out there and see what you have to say about it. The questioner wants to know how you're defining recovery, and what I think he or she means by that is it's traditionally been defined as abstinence-based. And for those who are not in the treatment and recovery field, there's a perspective of abstinence only. In other words, you do not partake in any substances other than something prescribed by a doctor, like medication-assisted treatment, something like methadone, or you're taking Lipitor, obviously, for your cholesterol. But there's also an approach often known as harm reduction, which is maybe I'm drinking less, or I'm only drinking, at night, not enough to the point where I'm going to have a hangover the next day. So that person is still using the substances, but they themselves may consider themselves in recovery because they've pulled back on their use. So
Yeah, that's another great question. We consider recovery to be we've found by experience that the most successful engagements with us are people who are involved in some sort of a program, whether it be a 12-step program, whether it be they've got counseling, or whatever the program is, and we sign ROIs, release of information agreements, so that we can communicate with those individuals. I very rarely have had a successful engagement where people say, I'm self-recovering, and I'm pulling back from. Sometimes it's a judgment call where you say, based on your activity, your performance, and your actions, do we see that there's a phrase that we use, are you impaired in any way? Right. So when I say that, do you appear to be impaired when you're here at work by a substance or by use of something? Right. So I guess I don't know what I don't know, but we typically will find that we tend to gravitate towards people who are involved in a program or committed to their recovery in some demonstrable way. And that can take a bunch of different, forms. But I tend to not put as much credence in people who say, I'm kind of walking this journey by myself, because it indicates to me that they're not going to be open to assistance. That's my honest answer.
I don't really have an answer to that question. It's a very interesting question. I'd have to consult HR on that one to get the exact details.
Yeah, it may seem basic, but it's actually, I think, pretty nuanced and complicated, I would imagine. And just terminology wise, we have somebody who noted in the chat that it points to the difference between recovery and sobriety. For some people, those may be the same thing, and for some, they may not. So just leave that on a question. So I think we're gonna close this out. Amazing presentations and heartfelt and passionate discussion. Thank you, Steve and Dana, so much. We're going to hear next, Kate's going to introduce folks. We're going to hear next from two employees who will give us their perspectives. So thanks again, Dana and Steve.
Thank you. Please feel free to reach out. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.